Last night I sat across from my husband and asked him something we really haven't talked about much in 10 years of survivorship. I asked him what he carried during those 9 months of diagnosis, chemo, surgery, radiation, when all the attention was on me. And he was standing in the kitchen. I was sitting at the kitchen counter facing him. He kind of leaned back on the kitchen counter and his voice went low. He started to speak very slowly. And I saw something in his face that stopped me. Fear, worry, sadness, gratitude, strength, and vulnerability all at once. It was like he was transported back in an instant. And 10 years later, the weight of all that he carried during my diagnosis, after the diagnosis, the treatment, just came rushing back. And what that moment showed me is that in 10 years of talking about survivorship, of living survivorship with him, I'd never really fully asked him that question. I had thanked him, I had acknowledged him, but I never sat down and said, tell me what it cost you. And I realized that this is probably true for a lot of survivors and their caregivers. We are so focused on our own experience, which is completely normal and understandable, that we sometimes forget there is another whole story happening on the other side of the bed. So for my sister survivors, today we're going to talk about what was happening for our caretakers while we were are fighting, and what you might do with that knowledge. And for the caregiver who found their way to this podcast, whether through a survivor you love or on your own, this episode is also for you. You are seen here. What is the problem, if you will? Well, caregivers are asked constantly how their loved one is doing, how the patient is doing. Almost nobody asks them how they're doing. And caregivers, I would venture to say, especially Latino husbands, especially fathers, especially the ones who are raised to be stoic, that don't wear their emotions on their sleeves because machismo, often have nowhere to put what they're carrying. In some ways, living a similar or parallel experience as their survivor wife or husband or partner. And this episode is the beginning of changing that. If you're a survivor who has never fully asked your caregiver what this cost them, or a caregiver who has never had the space to say it, that conversation is part of the work I do. Book a free discovery call at paperbell.me/Eileen Lopez Tomei. The link is always in the show notes. Hello, sister survivors. I am Eileen Lopez Tomei, 10-year breast cancer survivor and survivorship coach, and you are listening to Sana Sana. Welcome to episode 16. I'm in my feelings a bit today because we're going to talk about caregivers and my wonderful husband being mine, and my 13-year-old starts 8th grade tomorrow. 10 years ago this month, we dropped him off for pre-K 3, not knowing what the future held for me. And tomorrow, I get to drop him off as a healed and healing survivor. So first, I want to introduce you to a survivor I've referenced in previous episodes, but I don't think I've named. My mother-in-law, Eloisa. She came from Cuba in 1969, same year as my parents, just a few months before, with her 4 children. She already spoke English when she arrived. She went to college here in the US, and she became an elementary school teacher. She contributed to the financial and emotional well-being of her household for decades. She raised 4 professional, career-oriented, independent, loving children, the youngest of whom is my husband, Vicente. She had a fulfilling and long and wonderful career as a teacher. She was a woman of deep Catholic faith. She wanted her Cuban homeland free from socialism. She was tenacious, emotionally strong, low drama, and fiercely devoted to her family. She worked hard her whole life, and then she retired And then she got non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Her retirement was supposed to be for her, for travel, for rest, for enjoying her grandchildren. And she didn't get to do any of that because we lost her to lymphoma in 2007. And my husband, as did his 3 older siblings, adored her, and she adored him. He was the youngest of 4, and as his sisters will confirm, the best of them. And he admired her tenacity, her strength, her dedication, her perseverance, her low drama, her independence, and her connection, her strong connection to her family. He just admired her entire approach to life. He loved her very much, and her death hit him hard. As I said, she died in 2007. I was diagnosed in 2016, 9 years apart, and it's not nothing. 9 years is a long time. But when your wife's chemo schedule matches your mother's chemo schedule, and when the shots to increase white blood cell counts are the same, 9 years can collapse very quickly into yesterday. So he walked into my diagnosis, my breast cancer diagnosis, already carrying the memory of watching someone that he loved go through this and not survive it. Before we go any further, what I want you, dear listener, to understand about who my mother-in-law was and what it meant for him to watch me walk a path that had already broken his heart once, is that she was beautiful. She was a beautiful woman. She loved a good laugh. She had a fantastic sense of humor. She was a wonderful mother-in-law. She stood up for her daughters-in-law, always. Whether we were right or wrong, she always defended us. Not that we needed defending, let me be clear, but she took our side, no matter what. And like I said, she was a devoted mother. She loved her grandkids. When my daughter Cecilia was born, so my daughter Cecilia was the eldest grandchild of the grandchildren that Vicente and I had together. For every year of her birthday, she would buy her a beautiful dress. So for her first, second, third, all the way through until the year right before she died, because she died in February of 2007 and Cecilia's birthday is in March. So, yeah, she was a wonderful teacher. Her students remembered her fondly. She took good care of her class, of her classes. She was just an amazing, vibrant woman. Her daughters loved her. Her sons loved her. She had a tight-knit group of friends that she socialized. She and my father-in-law socialized with. Yeah, they were both hardworking people. And losing her was very hard for all of us, especially for my husband and his siblings. And, you know, the process of her going through chemo was also very difficult. It was very hard on her. So this is the backdrop with which, you know, my husband goes into my diagnosis. And so, you know, he, during the entire process, and we talked about this last night, you know, he was trying to stay optimistic for me and for the kids. But the experience of his mother's non-Hodgkin lymphoma treatment and death were fresh in the way that grief is always fresh when something forces you back to it. He told me, fighting the comparisons actively every day between my treatment and his mother's treatment, and the effect of his mother's treatment and my treatment. She had very, very harsh chemo that impacted her physically, notably, and I also had, you know, very harsh chemo that also impacted me physically, notably. And again, you know, the chemo schedule, the medication, the shots, the rhythm of treatment, all of it echoed something that he had already lived through and something that had ended differently. And I don't, you know, say that to be dramatic. Before yesterday, had never really sat down and talked to him about this, and I don't think that we talked about it certainly while I was undergoing treatment or even shortly thereafter, because it was like, whew, we're done, everything's great, we're moving on. But it's important for me to name what he was carrying under the optimism. He tried to get me and himself through each treatment cycle. He tried to keep our kids calm. He tried to keep things normal, especially for our youngest, Daniel, who was 3 at the time. And he was also a man who had lost his mother to cancer, who knew exactly how bad this could get, who was watching his wife walk down the same corridor. And he had no one to go to with that specific fear. Or, like, I say that and then I pause because there was support. I mean, he's very close to his siblings. He has very close friends, best friends. They've been friends since they were little, since elementary or before. So there was support. But because he felt, I think, that he had to be the emotional head of the household during that time, and because he naturally is someone who does not expect or want the focus to be on him, he had to keep calm and carry on and all that. And my husband Vicente doesn't mess around when it comes to staying grounded and calm and centered, especially during an emergency. Like his mom, he's low drama and highly dedicated to those he loves. He's also a natural optimist, but he definitely carries a strong undercurrent of realism. So he's not a negative person, but he's also not someone who's going to ignore the facts or the evidence. Let me now take the story back to my first chemo session. I decided not to take my anti-nausal medications the day before. I thought, I'm just going to have ginger tea, ginger candy. I'm going to go the natural route. In the chemo infusion, I know that they put anti-nausal medication, so I was like, that'll be enough. I think I went that route. It was partly hubris and partly remembering how negatively the anti-nausea medication had impacted my father, who was a cancer survivor. If you're a Latina breast cancer survivor who's always been the strong one, and you're just realizing that surviving treatment is only the beginning, I want to talk to you. My name is Eileen Lopez Tomei, and I am a 10-year breast cancer survivor and cancer survivorship coach. Through my ecosystem of healing process, I help survivors restore trust in their bodies, release perfectionism, and start living from a place of peace instead of just survival. Book a free discovery call at paperbell.me/Eileen Lopez Tomei. The link is in the show notes. And so I had my first chemo. Everything went well. No bad reactions during the session. And afterwards we decided to celebrate. I had chemo in the morning. He said, where do you want to go? Where do you want to have lunch? And so I asked him to take me to get Cuban food. I think I had like sopa de plátano, something kind of heavy. Anyway, we get home. I'm feeling okay. About 5 o'clock that afternoon, I got really sick. I was vomiting. I was retching. I was moaning. I didn't just get physically sick, but I felt horrible. And by that point, I don't remember if I had filled my anti-nausal medication prescriptions or not, but it was just too late. Like I had let too much time. I just had missed the window. Remember my husband calling the oncologist, worried that he might have to take me to the emergency room if the vomiting didn't let up. And in the middle of his own worry and, fear, he had to think about our son Daniel, who was 3 years old in the house, hearing his mother sick in a way that a 3-year-old can't understand. So he called our older kids to come to take Daniel outside, away from the sound of, me being sick. And I was throwing up, excuse me for being so graphic, but everything I'd had for lunch, like just trying to set the scene. It was not just physically devastating, but emotionally was devastating because I felt like I had started my first chemo strong and I had wanted to go in mentally and physically strong. And it felt like it had been a successful first chemo session. And now, this was happening. And, thankfully, my sister-in-law, my husband's sister, and her husband, my brother-in-law, happened to stop by that night to check in and, came across this scenario. And I do remember them standing at the foot of my bed Well, I was just moaning and moaning and moaning because that overwhelming feeling of nausea, it's like nothing that I had ever felt before and hope to never feel again. And, they were so encouraging and kind, especially my brother-in-law. And most importantly, they were there for my husband. I think they may have stepped outside with Daniel or maybe taken him to their house for a little bit. I don't remember exactly, but I know they were there, and kind of helped my husband manage that so that he could focus on me. And, that was the first night of 9 months where he had to hold his fear, his worries. He had to help to manage the house, school drop-offs and pickups, after-school activities, protect the children to the extent that he could, especially Daniel, who was the youngest, and stay optimistic for me all at once. And he did it, but it cost him something. And I want to pause here and say to all of the caregivers out there, and if there are any listening to you, dear caregiver, if you had a night like that where you had to send your kids, away to another room outside, where you had to hold your own terror while also holding your partner, I want you to understand now that something that maybe I couldn't fully see then, that we couldn't have done it without you. That, at least I remember just fully expressing, especially that night, fully expressing my own fear. It all just came crashing in. I think I'd been trying to hold it together after the initial shock and was very definitely making a concerted effort to be optimistic. I'm not, I hesitate to use the word positive because I think it can be associated with toxic positivity. And so I was definitely trying to be optimistic. And I realized now what I didn't realize then is that I was able to do that because of how my caregiver, my husband, his own feelings and fears together so that I could express mine. And that was part of my healing even early on in treatment. That was already kind of the beginning of an emotional healing that I didn't realize then that I would need in survivorship. So thank you. Thank you to my husband and thank you to the caregivers out there. So my husband, for me, he was present, he was kind, he was encouraging, he was supportive, he was optimistic, but he also listened and held my own fears and worries even as he carried his. He saw and acknowledged everything that I was going through, and I'm not sure that anyone saw or acknowledged his experience. And he would say that he's okay with that because that's not what that time was about me, not about him. Yeah, even now looking back, I'm certain that that's what he would say. He is a very selfless and self-sacrificing human and husband and father. And so for the outside world, for work, for the kids, for extended family, he was stoic, strong, stalwart. That doesn't mean that he didn't have and express his emotions, especially to his very close inner circle. But what I remember is the countenance that he presented was one of stoicism, just strength and solidity, I guess. And he was still growing in his career during that time, during the 9 months that I was in treatment. And while his immediate boss and bosses and colleagues were all extremely caring and supportive, not just of him, but of me as well, at the end of the day, corporate culture values FaceTime. While he was showing up for me, he was showing up at work. And thankfully, family, friends, and neighbors stepped up so that he could be there and he could do that. And I want to name this cultural layer directly and honestly. That expectation that a Latino husband is the stoic one who doesn't show the fear absolutely showed up in how he carried this. And he fulfilled that expectation. He was the emotional head of the household. He held the line. But holding the line has a cost. And that cost lived somewhere in him and not enough people asked about it. And when I asked him what sustained him during that time, his first answer specifically, he said prayer. Like I said, or maybe I haven't said, he is a man of great faith, just like his mother. And so he said prayer sustained him, the support of our community, his family showing up, my family showing up, our church community, our kids' school community, friends. He has two friends in particular that showed up a couple times to take our two middle kids, Cecilia and Vicente, out on a weekend outing because everything just became completely consumed by my treatment. I would get chemo on a Friday and then I would recover over the weekend and then telework, but work on the following Monday. So the weekends were just consumed with me recovering. I wasn't going out primarily because of my immune system, but also I just felt very fatigued and tired. And so he, these two friends of his, without being asked, showed up. And why is that special specifically to him? It's because my husband he's a really good dad. And one of the things that he strives, even now with the kids being older, to give them is meaningful activity, meaningful time, spending time with them, doing things that they love to do. And he wasn't able to do that during the 9 months that I was in treatment, or for a good portion of that time. So that was especially meaningful. And of course, my family and his family also took great care of our kids. We just had a wonderful support system. So he definitely felt supported and not alone in the practical sense, but emotionally the fear had nowhere to go because he was the one holding everyone else. He also says this: it all seemed to go by very quickly. He was trying to be in the moment and to be present for me in each moment, to get through each treatment, through each week, the school year, so like one event, one appointment at a time. And also told me how he found relief at every positive doctor's report, at how my oncologist was confident and unwavering, and that confidence fed his. And he didn't go deep into survivability statistics or prognosis research. He says that he wasn't interested in that. He was focused on me and the kids. Where he found his information from the doctors, from what he witnessed in the community around him, in his prior experience with cancer, with his mom and with my dad. And he says he found comfort in my own attitude, the courage that he felt that I displayed, my optimism and positivity, my spirit throughout treatment. I think I shared in a previous episode where each chemo session had a theme, and whoever went with me to that chemo session, we dressed in costumes or dressed in that theme. And so seeing how I was really desperately trying to handle all of this also helped him, which was I was very grateful to hear that. And I asked him what piece of advice he has for caregivers that are walking into like a newly diagnosed partner or a partner who's undergoing treatment. And his primary piece of advice is one that I think I've given you all, my dear sister survivors, in the past, which is line up the support early. Get everybody in on the plan. Tap into your network, family, friends, community, work, before you need it. So don't wait until things get, ugly and really difficult. As much as you're comfortable, of course, but let the key people who are going to be in that inner circle know what's going to be happening, and maybe, from a high level, explain the cadence of treatment, the impact of treatment that's going to have, not just on your partner or your loved one, but on you as well. Don't wait until you're overwhelmed. I guess I could sum all that up into like communicate, which is, my husband is such a great communicator and such an adamant believer in clarity, right? And just being really upfront and communicating and being clear about the expectations so that not only he could manage expectations, but others can as well. And his other piece of advice is the top priority is making sure that your partner has the help and support they need outside of medical care. And that if you have children, you cannot be the only one holding them during this time. Again, line up the support, let people in. And when that support is in place and people are coming through, the situation becomes more manageable, he says. You're not carrying it alone. And this advice is specifically important for Latino families and for any family with young children, because pride can get in the way of asking for help. Cultural expectations of self-sufficiency can make it hard to let people in. Remember my own story. Didn't want a meal train, was mortified when people, my sister was collecting names of people who would be willing to cook a meal for my family. And that was similarly true for my husband. And we had to let go of that cultural notion. And my husband's message is let them in early, before you think you need to. Let them in because the community wants to show up. So let them show up. Let them support you, especially as a caregiver, so that you don't have to hold on to it all by yourself. And for the caregiver who's listening to this episode, what you're doing is extraordinary, and it often goes unseen. If you want support in navigating this, or if you want to help your loved one get the support that she needs, come find me. Book a free discovery call at paperbell.me/Eileen Lopez Tomei. So, to my sister survivor, what can you do with what I just shared? Ask. I'd say, first of all, I would encourage you to ask. Ask your caregiver what it is costing them or what it has cost them. Probably a conversation better to have after you've gone through treatment, but I leave that up to you and to the sort of dynamic that you have with your partner and your caregiver in that space. So you don't have to ask them about logistics, but ask them about their feelings. What did they carry or what are they carrying that nobody asked them about? And you may not get an immediate answer. For some caregivers, especially those raised to be the strong one, the question itself is the beginning of a process. And it can be a long process, but it's the start, it's the first step. But do ask. And when their voice goes low, when they kind of lean back and their gaze goes distant, stay there with them. Don't rush past it. That is where the real experience lives. And do what your medical team and survivorship program hopefully did for you. Point your caregiver to the resources. Encourage him or her to access them. And I want to name what a gift this conversation with my husband was. It wasn't a very long and protracted conversation, but it was a real gift because when I asked, I noticed how he was transported back in just an instant. And what came onto his face was the full weight of what he had been holding and what he had been through. And really seeing it for the first time, and I'm sure I saw it when we were going through it, but probably just kind of glazed over it because of what I myself was feeling. But last night, just really seeing this for this experience, the weight of these feelings and these emotions that he carried for the first time deepened something in me. A gratitude that was already there, because I am and have always been extremely grateful for the support of my husband in cancer and beyond. But somehow having him share these feelings and seeing him transport back in time, mentally and emotionally, helped deepen my gratitude and make it more specific, more true, if you will. As a survivor, you might feel guilt that your illness put this weight on someone that you love. And that's a real feeling, and it deserves its own space. And I want to remind you that two things that seem like opposites or contradictory can coexist. So guilt and gratitude can coexist. You didn't choose the diagnosis. And partner, your caretaker, my husband, chose to show up the way that he did. And that's not your burden. It's not my burden to carry. It is his gift to be honored by us. So if you are the spouse, the partner, the parent, the sibling, the friend who held the line while someone you love fought cancer, this moment is for you. What you did was extraordinary. The meals, the appointments, the school runs, the 3 a.m. fears that you didn't say out loud, the optimism that you performed when you were probably terrified. All of it was a form of love that often goes unnamed. Nobody asked you how you were doing, or if they did, maybe they did it just politely as a social gesture of politeness. But mostly they asked about her. They sent prayers for her. They brought food for her. And you, even if you were asked, you said you were fine. because you are the one holding the line. That is who you are. But the fear was there, the grief was there, the memories it brought up, whatever losses were already in you that this diagnosis reached back and touched, those were there too. And if you're a Latino husband, a Latino son, a Latino father carrying this, you were handed a specific expectation, right? Be strong, be the provider, be the one who doesn't show fear. And maybe you honored that expectation and also found ways to be present and soft and vulnerable and real with the person that you were caring for. And that combination, strength for the world and tenderness for her, is not machismo. It is something better than machismo. It is what the best of our culture produces. And if you managed it or even approximated it, someone saw. Someone saw you do that and is grateful, even if they haven't found the words to express that yet. So in closing out this episode, I want to take us back to my mother-in-law who came from Cuba. She went to college in this country, became an elementary school teacher. She raised 4 professional, devoted, family-oriented children. She was faithful in her Catholic faith, in her hope for a free Cuba, in her love for her husband, for her family. And then she retired and she got sick. And she didn't get to enjoy what she had worked so hard for. But she left something behind. She left behind the man who showed up for me. So to every spouse, partner, parent, sibling, or friend who showed up the way that my husband showed up, who lined up the support, held the line, protected the children, circled the wagons around me, ran interference, stayed optimistic when they were terrified, and didn't let their own fear consume the care that they were providing to you, you were raised right. Whoever raised you gave you something extraordinary. And your loved one is alive in part because of how you showed up. And most importantly, to my husband, thank you. You were raised right. You did not let machismo get in the way. You stepped up when you had to, and I am grateful. Grateful that your mommy raised you right. Grateful to her for raising the strong and kind husband and father that she and your father did. And sometimes I realize that gratitude has to go backward as well as forward. So to the person who made the person who saved me, I thank you. I thank you, Eloisa, and I thank you, Vicente, my father-in-law. I wish that I could have expressed my gratitude to you, my dear mother-in-law, in person. And I will express my gratitude to my father-in-law in person. Thank you for giving me your son and for preparing him in the way that you did to be exactly the partner and the husband and the father and the friend that I needed 10 years ago. Sana sana, colita de rana. Si no sanas hoy, sanarás mañana. To the caregiver, you are seen. To the survivor, remember to ask for the help that you need. And to both of you, sana sana. Thank you, dear listeners, for being here again and week after week. I can't believe we're already in episode 16. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to Sana Sana wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. Follow wherever it is that you're listening, and leave a review. It helps more survivors and caregivers find the show. And if this episode moved something in you, share it with the caregiver in your life. They've been waiting for someone to see them. If you're a survivor who's ready to look at what the people around you carried, or if you're a caregiver who finally wants space to say it, come find me. Book a free discovery call at paperbell.me/Eileen Lopez Tomei. I'd love to be in the room. See you next week. Sana Sana. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Sana Sana, the show that helps you heal and restore the parts of your ecosystem that were depleted after a breast cancer diagnosis. If you liked the episode, please leave us a rating and review so we can reach more incredible survivors como tú who want to heal with us. If you want to stay connected with our growing community, check out our Instagram at Eileen Lopez Tomei Coach and share what part of the episode touched your heart today. See you next week.